My name is Sonia Luz Gomez. I'm from UNAD Florencia Casetá. This activity is a research project in practical assignment 2. Well, to start, chapter number 1, Introduction. Education in Colombia since its inception has evolved tremendously. At first, the student has created limitations. On the one hand, their role in a classroom is simple, based on an assistant, and absorb all kinds of information without having the right opportunity to participate or to present their point of view. On the other hand, its work was individualistic, as for some reason all those who would like to have the opportunity to access it, i.e. inclusion and cooperation, were not very familiar terms. While there has been today to the student the power to actively participate and have greater autonomy, education continues to have loopholes that seriously affect their development. For this reason, and despite the remarkable evolution of this, not difficult to realize that although changes are made and given more values to some roles, you are still downplaying what can possibly contribute positively to the development, advancement, and progress of our country or department, or maybe municipality, in this case Florencia. Was a general background. This research project will be focused on focal group method. This method focuses on a social practice of qualitative technique in which a study of the opinion and attitude that are generated on the issue, which is to be investigated in a public group selected, allowing them to build their own point of view, is prepared and investigate general or specific. It is used in social science and business studies contexts in which a broad social interaction is allowed. The statement of problem. What kind of activities can be included as a teaching practical material in a booklet to implement cooperative learning as an approach to teaching English in inclusive education in a group of children at Jorge Eliezer Gaitán High School? Well, that is the problem. And entering further education issue and more to teaching a second language, it is found that teaching a new language rather than an obligation is necessary for all people in Colombia, especially for those who wish to belong to a labor camp and open as many career opportunities. At that same time, due to global changes likely are taking our country and we are coping in terms of globalization, we are left to wonder whether implement a cooperative learning in teaching English as a second language in an inclusive context. It can be improved through the use of educational and practical activities contextualized ways. Therefore, and the main reason is to make this project, which is designed for the purpose of conducting research for the improvement and sustainability of education, with a central nexus that will be teaching a foreign language, which is used as a tool to capture the attention of society, creating and keeping alive the ancient culture, creating identity and sense of belonging for education, in order to search and generate progress in the educational and social environment and determine whether any changes can be generated with teaching a new language. research objectives, general objectives, to design contextualized didactic practical material as a booklet for the implementation of cooperative learning as an approach for teaching English in inclusive education. Specific objectives: to diagnose needs in terms of inclusion and cooperativeness in a context of teaching and learning of the English language that can be overcome by using didactic practical teaching activities. Scope research. The scope of this study is to design an inclusive education booklet for a group of students at Jorge Eliezer Gaitan High School by the design of contextualized didactic practical material for cooperative learning in an inclusive education. Limitation of the research. The application of general standards for the student because of their level in English subject. Significance of the study: to allow the student to interact in another language through activities that are developed taking into account their context and all of those things that they are surrounded, improving the cooperative work and integrating them through inclusive education. Definition third: inclusive education, cooperative learning, interculturalism. Chapter 2, Literature Review. Overview. Well, this paper called Una propuesta inclusiva de aula para la enseñanza de idiomas, el apoyo y la colaboración entre iguales by Ana Vidal Domenech, Lidon Moliner Mirabet, and Elena Beltran Villar, came from an experiment conducted in several centers of primary education. In this context, certain gaps and needs in language teaching students with disabilities were detected. Therefore, they raised a proposal classroom in which methodologies such as peer tutoring and shared technician that from an inclusive model takes diversity of classroom meant to promote and encourage language learning for all the students. During its development, a working proposal, collaborative and cooperative peer correspond to one of the philosophies presented in inclusive classroom. For the literature research, the lack of initiative where the English language, functional diversity and cooperative work between equals is linked or found. Through this educational proposal, answer was given to the diversity of college stroke faced by pupils and how to work not only in the area of foreign language, but in other subjects offered. He also tried to respond to the problems identified in the study presented that focused on the lack of human resources and space. This initiative is a small contribution to an interdisciplinary field of the study, which today poses many challenges in the current educational system. Related previous theories. Garantía de derecho a la educación inclusiva en Bogotá. This work is a qualitative assessment of the guarantee and enjoyment of the rights to inclusive education in Bogotá in the Article 34 of the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. To achieve this goal, a distinction of concepts and analysis of the regulatory framework of education from people who present disabilities in Colombia and Bogotá, and finally, qualitative analysis of the educational offer district for people with disability. It was developed. the responsibility of the inclusion process in the educational institution. However, this responsibility is all shared by the Ministry of Education and local authorities. Previous studies, the research called El trabajo cooperativo, una alternativa pedagógica para promover competencias ciudadanas en el aula inclusive en el grado primero en la institución educativa Juan 23 y Centro Educativo Personita del municipio de Florencia, Caquetá, talks about the theme of educational inclusion has been implemented for several decades in the country, which corresponds to one of the policies in education has been concluded between different states of the world promoted by UNESCO. This issue has been studied in different events and it is intended to eliminate the barriers of social, decreasing poverty, restore the violated rights under the slogan Education for All, improving educational levels to which they get these people to improve their living conditions. Research framework, theoretical framework. Educación inclusiva y aprendizaje cooperativo, una propuesta pedagógica para la educación infantil. In this work by Rachel Grana, it shows how through cooperative learning is possible that all students learn in the same context through their own effort and through group work. First, but biography review inclusive educational and cooperative learning took place, highlighting its main characteristics and its relation to practical application in the classroom. Work by cooperative projects were also analyzed as a suitable technique for applying cooperative learning in early childhood education classrooms. Second, a practical proposal to this stage were different lines of action for teachers who wish to introduce cooperative learning in the classroom and in order to compensate for the theory and practice offered was developed. Finally, a series of final reflections on the process were structured. Conceptual framework, inclusive education. It is an educational model that aims to address the learning needs of all children with a special emphasis on those who are vulnerable to marginalization or social exclusion. But how does this educational model emerge? What are its main proposals? Moreover, what does it want to achieve? Initially, in school, it was common to observe the absolute denial of the right to education to different groups of people. But the concept of education has had many changes at the present time. The situation has improved considerably, leaving as an effective result the partial or full integration of the people. Let them to be part of access to all levels of education without any rejection, exclusion, or without distinction. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and defined inclusive education as a process designed to respond to diversity, increasing participation, and reduction inclusion. It is related to the presence, participation, and achievement of all students with special emphasis on those who, for different reasons, are excluded or at risk of being marginalized. Cooperative learning. It is one of the most important teaching approaches that seeks to make the maximum use of activities in which it is necessary to help between students, as in pairs or small groups, to develop some elements within a teaching learning context through interaction.